So let's see here. I'm gonna dive in because it took about an hour last time, so we might have some questions. That'd be cool. But what I want to show is the new version of my QuadTone Profiler software, and this is introducing a lot more tools based on stuff I did in Excel maybe 3 years ago to 4 years ago even. But what this is now a Mac application that does all the partitioning and correcting for you kind of automatically based on a GUI. So to do that, we're going to need to switch over to the second screen here. So that should be showing my desktop in just a moment. So what we're going to need to do first is create an ink separation negative to then print with our ink limits kind of set to 100. That's going to separate each channel into its own set of measurements that we'll be able to import into my app, and that will do the partitioning for you. So what we'll do here is, and you'll get it from my website here. So if you go to software, you go to Target Generator, and that's a free app that will be able to do this custom ink separation negative setup. So if we go over to, I'm going to leave that open for next time. So we'll go to, first we'll do the K3 inks for the Epson Ultrachrome printers. So we'll go here to go to ink separation target generator, and we'll go to negative image and use the same limit for all inks. And we'll choose black, and light black. We're only going to do three channels with this setup. We can put the ink limit to 100, and we'll save that as a TIFF. And we'll put it on the desktop as K3 100 neg. I like to put ink separation in there. So let's say ink separation 100. There we go. Save that. And while we're here, I'll set up to do the Piezo Pro dual quad ink set. So we'll choose black as the first ink, and we'll choose the cool inks first. So cyan, and light black. And then we'll choose black, magenta, light magenta, and yellow. Those are going to be the warm inks. So we're duplicating this so we can measure this target twice. We'll measure these first four, save that file, then measure the last four. So we'll save this, and we'll call this Piezo Pro Inksep 100. And now these need to be edited in Photoshop just to get the size correct. So we'll just pop open to, now it's on the desktop. We'll open these both in Photoshop. And we're just going to change the image size, so Command Option I for the image size. Resample to nearest neighbor. That's going to just not do any interpolation between 2 pixel values. It's just going to copy them right on the edge there. And we'll make it a little larger, maybe 3.5 inches tall. And you see I have the unchecked constrained proportions, and make it about 9 inches wide. And that's just going to give a little more space. And now we can just save this and close it. And then we'll do the same with the K3 ink separation image. Make it about 1 inch tall. And see, this is so weird. The scaling is real weird. So let's make sure it's 360. That's why we double check here. And about 9 inches wide and about 1 inch tall. And save that. Now we'll need to print this in Print Tool. So you're going to use whichever one you have for your printer. I'm going to demo the K3 first. So we'll just drop it into Print Tool, rotate it about 1 inch from the top and sides, and make sure you're set to no color management. And we'll need to check the proper printer here. And say run print, you can go down to layout to get to the QuadToneRIP print dialog box and go to QuadToneRIP calibration mode and make sure that's set to 100. So it's going to print as much ink as possible for 3 separate channels. Then we'll go to 2880 for the resolution, unidirectional, and sheet feed. Now you can actually just save this as a preset. QTR calibration 100 only for this printer. And just want to double check. Yeah, so if you want to if you have any questions, you can pop them into the chat, and I'm glancing over every few minutes to look at the chat window. So I'll save this. I'm actually not going to print it, just cancel that. But we'll do the same for the Piezo Pro if we wanted to use those. So we'll just choose a different printer. So we can delete that from there, rotate it, make it 9 inches high. So you would do this for whatever printer you're using. But you would print this and then make sure it's perfectly dry. All that milkiness is gone from the back. And then you can just hair dry it for about 5 minutes. It usually does it. Then you're going to print that with whatever process you're using, and then process and dry normally. And then you're going to measure each row individually. So you're going to measure each patch starting from the white patch to the black patch. And that'll get you a set of measurements you can use right now with the next part of this app. So I'm going to just quit print tool for now. So in my new version here, there is a little window that pops up that gives you all the options for the different workflows you can use. So I have pretty good instructions for this QCD and starter curve setup, so I'm not going to go into that here, but I do want to share everybody is the custom curve generation. And this is the new thing I built for more advanced users or people who have customizing sets or are using some processes that don't really work with the quick curve setup. So to use this, we need to load a measurement of all those inks. And I'm not going to go into the measurement stuff now. I just want to kind of move it along because we have kind of a lot to cover. But I have a bunch of demo files here. And so I'll start with the K3. And for this, I'll use Lodema silver paper. I don't have a quick one I could access for platinum, but we'll just use Lodema, which is a grade 2 silver chloride paper. This would be somewhat similar for Ilford. I do have one for Ilford. We'll use Ilford instead. So basically, you just drag this file into here, and this file, of course, is a CGATS file with measurements for all 3 channels. For the lab, LA and B, as well as the black, light black, and light black. So when you drop this file into the app here, it automatically finds those 3 channels and then graphs the density. So these are the graphs of the lab L values. And so you can say black, and light black. And as you do this, you'll see the curves update for the ink channel you're using. And it's doing it from the darkest ink at the top because it's obviously blocking the most light, the mid ink, and then the light ink. And then on this chart on the right, it's actually partitioning and graphing the quad values based on the measurements here. You can also open this button. This is going to show you I can put it here for the moment, just so we can see everything on the screen at once. But this is going to pop up the ink channels in just a moment. So if you lower the light black value, let's say you load it to maybe 75. So 75 is an ink limit of 75. And if we click in this lower ramp here, so this is the black point to the white point, and we're going to mostly pay attention to the white point, or the point on the right side of the curve here, or the measurements. If we click in there, you can see the lab value is 16.68, and down here it's 11.24. So this light black channel at an ink limit of 76, or let's say 75, is giving you a little bit of blocking, mostly right in the shadows, which is good because we want to have nice smooth shadows. Now, if we look at the light black channel, we can lower the ink limit here, and you see how everything kind of updates in real time. So it's recalculating the partitioning points as well as the rough linearization based on the ramp of the black channel. So we're looking at it as kind of even spacing between these 3 lab values. So maybe 15, 60-ish, and 90 something. So if we're looking at the black channel, it starts to block 100% of the light at around 82.5 or 90. It absolutely blocks it, and then kind of lightens up a little bit right there. You can kind of see the curve dive back down a touch. So here we can say, let's put it at 85 because there's going to be some overlap at the end here, and we don't want to flood the paper or the film with too much ink. So 80, you can still see it's blocking basically a paper white. So it's 97.04. That's almost paper white. It might actually be paper white for Lodema. I don't recall off the top of my head what that actually is. Then we have 58 and 16. That's a good distribution. You can kind of see these spaces here between these three graphs. Now, with that done, we can kind of close this ink channel ramp view there. Now we want to mess with the starting overlaps. So the other cool thing I built into this new version is changing the ramps up and down from each individual ink. So the starting for the lightest ink is obviously not going to do anything because it starts at 0. But the starter for the mid-gray ink can ramp over so that you have more ink in covering the beginning part of this other ramp. It seems like a good, 0.8. You can always crank it all the way up because it's going to start at 0. So there's a lot of overlap in through this whole channel. You can do the same with the black ink. You don't want to go too far into the midtones because there's very little ink being put down here, and black does block a whole lot of light. So if you have too much going through your midtones, you'll see little dots where it's blocking more light than the curve up here, or the mid black channel. Now you can also do the ending overlaps separately from the beginning overlaps. So here is a little, you have to kind of control this a little more than the starting overlap, because at a certain point, you can kind of see the lower toe here kind of flattening out, and then it starts increasing more. And at a certain point, it's going to have a problem with the ink balancing formula and do just this, where it kind of glitches out. And this is going to be different for a different point for each different ink set because of the amount of overlap you can put in there. So I like to have enough where you don't see these kind of harsh shoulders in these curves, where they kind of change position. So that seems to do just fine. And now we increase a little bit of overlap at the very end of the scale, maybe to about 20. So we'll drag this up so that it looks, there we go. Now you see that the black limit actually dropped down to just a little bit below 70. That's because we're balancing the amount of ink you put in right here. Okay, so with that done, this is where you can edit these kind of small adjustments, like where we lower the ink down to 70, but we do want to kind of bring it up without messing with these other values. So you can click this Edit Ink button, and what you can do here is go into each channel. So let's say I'll go into the lightest black first, and grab one of these points and move them around a bit. So you can, as soon as you open this, it's going to, as soon as you click on the drop-down menu for that channel, it will separate out the individual channel into these editable curve points. And you can select them as well as add or delete them. So when that looks good, you can say accept. It's going to apply it back to here. And then we can go to the light black channel. And this is what I mean by being able to delete them. You can select one of these points and hit delete on the keyboard, and it's automatically going to select the next point. So if you wanted to do some smoothing to this, you could just delete every other point. So I deleted ones and hit tab, and you can use tab and shift tab to go forward and backward. So I'll hit tab and delete, tab, delete, tab, delete, all the way through. Just see, I just deleted the wrong one there. So I have one selected there. I can just bring it over. It's actually the end. You can delete the end one. And it's going to give a problem. You can just drag it back over. If you drag off too far, it's actually going to delete the point for you. So if we do that, now this is the last point we have. You can drag this down and accept that. And now we don't want to mess with these points too much. So we can just do, if we want to bring this black value back up, we can just increase the boost like this. So we'll move it back up to about 80. And the gamma, this is for lightening. So if you lower the gamma, it's going to put more ink into the negative, so it's going to lighten the print. You raise the gamma, it's going to take ink away and darken the print. So because of this area right in here, I just want to have some more separation through there. So I'll give it something like that. This is just kind of based on experience and messing around with this for a while. But basically you want to have nice smooth curves. That's the goal here. When you're done with that, you can hit finish editing, or if you're using, let's say Palladium, and you want to add some yellow blocking, there's no yellow ink here because it's not part of the gray partition curves, but you can just go into the editor, select yellow, and we're just going to delete all the points. So I'm just holding down delete to get rid of them all. And if you right click, you can add a curve point back. So I dragged too far off, so you just right click and it adds a curve point, and you can right click any number of points to add curve points. So the black I would recommend, I'm sorry, with the, if you're adding a single channel like this, I would recommend just using a straight line. And that's going to add that much ink to the QuadToneRIP curves, and it'll be included in the partitioned output that we'll use for the linearization calculations. So that looks about like, I don't know, 10, 20, about 20% there. We'll accept that. Oh, it was about 30. That's okay. And we'll finish editing. So when you do that, now you can save the quad file. And then you could, I mean, before saving it, you could add as many number of points as you want. What did I say? Was this Lodema? No, this was Ilford. So I'll click that so it has the number of, the number of seconds in the exposure and the development time. And let's say K3 plus Y. You can't use plus, so maybe say like that, like that. So that's making one there. That's pretty easy, but the little bit harder is to do like a dual quad setup for the Piezo Pro inks. So for that, what you can do is just bring these values all back down to 0. And I have, for albumin, the cool measurements and the warm measurements. So this is going to print out like this. So I had the cool on top. So this is the black channel. This is the lightest. The cool dark gray was that mid one there, all the way down to the cool dark gray. Sorry, cool light gray. And then I have the warm ink. So this is black duplicated, and then the warm dark gray, warm mid gray, and warm light gray. And from this scan, you can kind of see that they block different amounts of light. So we're building two separate curves and I'm going to blend them with another tool that's built into the software. So we'll close that, and all you need to do here is just like we brought this one in, just drag it in, and it will automatically graph them. And on the graphs here on the right, these channels are being controlled by these drop-down menus. So you have to reselect the cool inks there. And you can see they already partition out to 4 quad curve there. So now we'll just lower the limits. I always start with the light black, or the lightest ink. If you drag a slider to make the ink limit go lighter than the next lighter ink, it's going to do basically a divide by 0 and is an error that I can't catch in the app yet, so it's going to cause a crash. So always start with the lightest ink and work your way up. So I'll drag the limit for the light cyan down to like 75, 80. This is not critical. We're mostly looking at the smoothness and distribution of ink curves. So there's never going to be a perfect ink limit. It's going to be, not a perfect recommendation for all ink limits. But this is going to be personal and kind of tailored for different ink sets and processes. So don't be afraid if you're using a dual quad to really crank up the ink limits, because we're going to blend 2 curves together. So we're more looking about having good distribution of inks and good shapes on the overlaps, rather than everything being the same level here. So now we can play with the starting overlaps. So like I said, the lightest one always starts at 0, so there's nothing else to overlap here. So always start with the next lightest when you're doing the starting overlaps. So here I'm going to bring it basically all the way over to 1, so we have this nice gradual shape right in the bottom corner there. And I'll do the same for the mid cool gray, and the black, I'll start at about 35, 40, maybe even a little lower, 45. Like I was saying, you don't want too much black dots in the middle part of the curve. We'll use the ending overlaps to kind of control how much comes over there. So like the others, you can drag the ending overlap over. And you see how at a lower value it starts to get these shoulders based on just the slope down, basically. So you just want to go until you have some amount of distortion that's going to be hard to correct for in the editing. But also we'll do this where we drag this up to about 20. Now keep in mind that the ink limit for here, let's see, I'm going to keep it about 85. So you can see it drops down to 75 because of the amount of overlap we have. That's the ink balancing calculations we're doing. So now we just hit the edit quad curve and we'll choose the light black first. And I want to get rid of this little point there. So I'm just doing a little bit of extra smoothing. And that looks good. And now we'll choose, so there's a little bit of a weirdness there. We can click it again. It's going to go back through and resample. And adjust this a little bit. So you can see I can actually grab the points with the mouse and move them up and down, or use the arrow keys. So accept that. We'll choose the light cyan. That more or less looks good. Maybe just bring that up a touch right there. So like I said, I'm just looking at the overall smoothness. Accept that. And now we'll do the cyan. So the cyan, I want to kind of get rid of this harsh. It's not that harsh, but like a little bump there. So we'll do that and accept that. Now we want to bring the boost back up a little higher. So what did I say? It was like 85. Let's do 90. Let's do 85. See, it's not critical because we have a lot of overlap here, and we're going to be blending the warm inks in as well. So we'll finish editing those, and we'll save that as demo files, albumin, and it's going to be the cool. So I'll choose that and just clean this file name up a bit. And now we'll do the same for the warm ink. So I'll just lower these all the way down to 0 and grab the warm ink separation image and drag that in. You can also just go to load measurements. It'll do the same thing. But since I have this window open with all the measurement files, it's easy enough just to drop them in. So now we need to choose the warm inks. So it's matte magenta, sorry, black magenta, light magenta, and yellow. And you see here they're blocking different amounts of UV light than the cool inks did. So this is why we're doing this separately. Ink limit 85-ish. That's a good, it's giving a lot of ink in the shadows for nice smooth open shadows. Maybe 80 for that. We're like giving a good spacing here, maybe even a little lower. I'm going to drop that a little lower so we can get good spacing. That's more what I'm looking for. And now the black limit I'll drag down to the same as the other, 85. And we can adjust that in a moment. So now we're going to do the starting overlaps. So I'm going to drag the light magenta all the way over to 1 to get ink down into this part of the lower curve here. Same with the dark gray. I'm going to get a little more of that. That's the magenta channel over to here. And a little more in the, actually I had it about 45 in the previous one. I'll do the same there. Ending overlaps, we're going to look for the same thing. Bring a lot of ink back over. Again, if you go too far, ink balancing formula will kind of crash out on you and give you this big visual error that you've gone too far. So I'll just drag in so it's nice smooth overlap into the next couple inks. Same with the other channel. So that's where you go too far, so you back off. This one does not update continuously like these other curves do, just because of the different ink balancing stuff that goes into it. I might update that later. That's a good amount of curve there. Just kind of looking at these shapes. It's nothing super critical, just kind of roughing it in. And again, about 20 on the overlap for the next darkest ink. You can see it drop down the ink limit because of the amount of overlap. Now with that kind of roughed in, you will edit the quad curve. And we can go to the yellow channel first and just kind of smooth out this stuff here. So using the arrow keys just to I know it's hard to see yellow on white. I'm trying to figure out a different color for that. It's be a little bit easier to see. If you hold the shift key down while you are editing the points, it's going to jump up by 10 pixels rather than a single pixels. You accept that. That's a good shape there, kind of going all the way into about 60%. So we'll do that with the light magenta. And here I'll do the thing where I delete every other point just to give a little smoother starting point. And we can, I'm using tab and shift tab to go back and forth between the curve points. So I don't want to edit the top really. That's going to change where the majority of the ink is laid down, and you can start to see bumps and things up there. So do something like that, and there we go. Accept that one, and now we'll go into the dark gray, and I will delete every other point here as well. And we have a little distortion right there, so I'll just drag this curve point back up. Maybe do that. It's a little easier shape going down. And now we'll deal with this black channel. I'll have this come more straight up. So here we can just click this and just even these points out a bit. I can delete this one and then crank this back up. So here we can either use the boost or use the edit the black channel without editing the other channels. Accept that, and it goes back up to about 85. And we have the readout here is 85. That looks good. We'll finish editing that, and now save the quad curve. Now you want to make sure you don't go edit any of these other values after doing the edit curve, because it's going to reset all that work we just did in the editor. Now we can just hit save quad file. This will be the warm ink, and you know what you do? You just press the cool one there and just rename cool to warm, and that's going to make a new file. So we can now load these into, because of the dual quads, we actually need to blend them together. So that is a separate tool I built in the new app. So we can just, we're done with the automatic curve creation. We can just quit this now, or close this. We don't want to quit the app. If you get to the screen, like a blank window, but you still have the app activated, you can go to Window and say Show Startup Screen, which is also Command 1. And that will get you back to the workflow selection screen. Now, after you do the partitioning, you need to print your linearization target. And that is basically, I use a 128-step target. You can use 11, 21, 51, 101, 128, 129, and 256-step targets. Did I miss any? 86. You can also use an 86-step target. Basically, what you do is you install your starter, the curve we just created. Oh, I'm sorry, I've skipped a step. We need to do the blending. Let's say you used your K3 inks. Then you would do the load it, install it for your printer, and then print the linearization target. The dual quad, you actually have to jump into the curve blending scene. And it's a new window that pops up. And you can resize it if you need to. And we will go to the Finder here, and we'll get the two quad curves we just created, so the cool and the warm. You can drag those right into here. It's going to load the second one as the screen here. So curve 1, blended, and 2. If you show blended, see everything is set to 100 here, so there's no blending being done. But as soon as you move these, it starts to bring in the other channels. So now remember, the warm inks actually block more light than the cool inks, so I'm going to add more warm ink than cool ink. But basically the idea is you want enough overlap of each individual channel and smooth ramps up and down. So here you just kind of play with these values until the curves look good. And look good, quote unquote, is subjective. But also you want to make sure that there's no harsh transitions from one ink to the other. So you don't want to do something like this, right? Where these things are going up and down. You want to have nice smooth curves for each ink. And so I'm just playing with these values to get some good settings here. No like hard and fast rules on this. You just don't want to have something like this where they ramp up and down kind of inconsistently. I found that when they do block different amounts of light, doing a 50-50 blend is not really the best idea. It's better to have a little bit more of one ink than the other. Now, why would we not increase the light or the cool inks more than the warm inks if the warm blocks more? Mostly for flooding the paper, I think. I'd rather have these things down here like this. I'm getting some messages, and I'm wondering if this has to do with the live stream. Okay, it has nothing to do with the live stream. Because of the Facebook comments on the digital negative group, I want to make sure we're not missing anybody here. And again, if anyone wants to pop in some questions, we can look there in the chat there. So this is a good starting point. I want to have maybe a little more of the warm ink just because I'm looking at the shape of the cool ink. So that looks good. We'll save the blended curve. Not super happy with the shape of these. So we could go in and edit these further, but I think this is a good starting point, especially for the demo. So we'll hit Save Blended Curve, and instead of warm, I'll just say blend. And so that saves the starter curve. If we open this in curve view, you can see how much inks are overlapping there. So if we count these, starting from the top of the cool light gray or the warm light gray, it's about 30%. And these graphs in the QTR curve view are not accurate in terms of the axes, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little bit of 5 and 6 inks there. So all through the scale, we have 5 or 6 overlapping inks. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yeah. Which is good. You want a lot of filled in dots for this. That's the whole idea of using QuadToneRIP and controlling each of these channels separately. All right, so at this point, you would install the starter curve, the blended curve here, and print your linearization target. Then you would go through the process of exposing it in the darkroom, do your final processing like you would do all your other ones. So like for albumin, I needed to do the clearing, the fixing, and the toning. Actually, it's clearing, toning, fixing for each set there. So you need to do the same toning as you would with each actual real print. So with that done, we will have this 128 step target. So if you open it in just a text editor, it'll look like that. The actual print of it is this. So here's the white point here down to the black point. I scanned this a little while after I actually did the profiling, so I didn't fix it just long enough, or didn't wash it long enough, excuse me. And so it started to silver a little bit and get a little bit fogged, but when I measured it, it was fine. It's just a little bit fogged in the scan here. So to get to the linearization, you'll just hit Gray Curve Linearization. If you have both of these closed, you can actually press Command 3 to get the linearization window. And here is when we'll drag in the measurements. So it's this here, drag that in, as well as the quad curve, which is going to be the blended curve. And as soon as you drag these in, it will do the correcting and the linearization for you. So you can see there's some measurement errors, and we have these big blocky chunks here in the quad curve. To sort that out, you just move these smoothing sliders, and that's going to, this main smoothing window is going to kind of move down the curve and down the measurements and average these points together and create a new point. So if you go too far, it actually averages points that are darker than the current point. Like here, it's averaging all of these. So the darker points are taking, or kind of influencing more than the lighter points are, just because of the shape of the window. To get back from that, you just hit this fine smoothing percentage, and you want to just have a balance between what is measurement errors, which are the black dots are the original measurements, and the red line is the smooth measurements, and the red line is what's being used for the actual linearization calculations. What we can also do is hit preview inks, and it'll give you a graph of the, samples of the measured values and the target output values. So if we click here, you see 54.18 is the measured value for, if this is 0.10 or 11. We get down here, 57 is the output value, it's the target value, and that's what the final print will look like. You can also do a preview image. So if we do this, we can grab an image from the desktop, and see this one, let's drag this in. And when you load this, it's going to simulate the demask for the uncorrected, or you can click corrected. There we go. So this is what the actual print will look like at the dmax, which is just high of 25 here of a lab value. So 1.32 is going to look about like this. Here is the, without the dmax, so we're simulating the color rather than the color and the actual tonality in the print. So you can do preview off, uncorrected. You see it's a little dark. That's why the red line goes below the green line there. And the corrected looks more correct. We also have a manual curve control, which is basically like a Photoshop curve. So right now, from 0 to black, sorry, 100% to 0%, dmax is a straight line. That's what we're seeing at this green line here. If you wanted to make a little bit of shadow compression, you can select this darker value, and see when you move it, it actually darkens the simulated color here. So you can add a little contrast back without having to edit your Photoshop file. So in cases where your dmax is relatively light compared to like 0% reflectance, like a lab value of 0, which kind of doesn't exist, you could just kind of edit these output points so that you build in a slight amount of shadow compression to offset the perception of lower contrast print because of the relatively lower dmax. So we can look like that. If we simulate the dmax, it's going to look uncorrected, which is a little too dark, and then corrected is fixed. It's a little hard to see probably from the stream and the kind of actual dmax color there, but we can say uncorrected and then corrected. So it's just darkening up the shadows a touch. You can click this point here, and so you click to activate it. It's going to put a little green dot on there, and you can nudge down. So I'm going to get that about like that. So we're looking at the green line as well as this line, because the green is actually the target output lab values, and this is just from 0 to 100. So something like that, we'll hit OK. It's going to apply that, and now we have a couple of different options for the output here. We can save a new QuadToneRIP curve file, which we will do. I'm going to call it blend 250. This is actually at 400 units, just based on the measurement file name. So, and I'm going to put manual curve, so MC or CS for compressed shadows. And if you wanted to do a straight line, we could hit manual curve again. It's going to reset it when it opens. Hit OK and save this again. So now we're going to save 2 quads, and this is just going to be LIN for linear. At this point, your kind of work is basically done in terms of correction and linearization. Now you would just print my torture test image or one of your test images. And I also recommend using a 21 step or 51. If you have enough paper, enough room, you can even do a whole 128 step target just to confirm linearity and needing to do any final like tweaking and adjustments based on this initial linearization. So you also have the option of exporting a Photoshop file. And so when you do that, you hit save, it's going to pop this up. I'm going to do that. And we can also do a lut.q file and save that. I'll do the same thing, same name. So it adds the extension for you. We can close these. So then we can go into Photoshop. Let's see, find. let's see what this picture is. Yeah, so here we'll have to make this a black and white. I'm just doing this real quick. I'm not going to do any adjustments here. Just stay auto, done. Merge those. So here, if you're doing a color lookup table, you actually need to have a color or RGB image. So you do lookup table, and you say load 3D lookup table. And it's on the desktop, demo files. And there we go. So you do that, it's going to apply the correction. So it's adding more ink, so it's darkening it. And now you would go in and add your invert layer. And now you just print this. So you wouldn't, you don't need to do anything else like loading it, or you can probably just print right from here if you're not using QuadToneRIP. If you are using QuadToneRIP, basically you just delete this. You have your invert file, you flip it right to left. Oh, come on, delete the LUT. And load this in print tool and print with the linearized quad file. Here I just kind of want to show the other two. So you can do a curve, load curve file, and that's going to be in albumin. There we go. And you see it. I recommend doing LUTs because curves has this ability to include these kind of jumps here. These are actually the corrections, but the LUT does it with 256 steps, whereas a curve file will actually use only 16 steps. So we'll just delete these. We're not going to use those. But I just wanted to show you that you can use a curve file or an LUT file instead of using QuadToneRIP if you need to. This would be if you're using image setter negatives. So you'd have to print basically a step wedge target from your image setter supplier, take it in the darkroom, make the print, take the measurements, and you load that into here to get the LUT or the ACV file. So that's basically the entire process. Of course, like you need to have your rounds of going into the darkroom and doing that kind of stuff, but that's basically the whole workflow. I do want to show you just a couple of other things built into the app. So Command 1 will get you the, oops, we need to, back here. Command 1 will get you the startup screen. There's a color tint linearization. The same idea is you drop in your measurement file, and this uses the SVT or CVT, whatever, spot color tone value correction. And this is going to take into consideration the lab A and B channels as well. So not just the lab L values, it's going to linearize to all three. So the color tint is going to be perceptually correct for all steps here. So this is really useful if you're doing tricolor gum bichromate printing, or if you're doing multicolor carbon transfer printing like Calvin Greer is doing. Here you can export as quad file, Photoshop ACV, or LUT files as well. Also super helpful if you're making image setter negatives. So we'll close that. We saw the curve blending. We have the curve editor. So here, if you did want to like smooth out something, let's say we have, oh no, come on. It's switching spaces on me. Let's try demo files from here. There we go. We have our linearized file here. We can drag that in. And this is similar to the first setup we had. We can choose, say we wanted to smooth out this right here, or maybe this at the end. So we choose the magenta curve, and we just drag that back up to make it a little smoother. This is going to affect your linearization, so you want to linearize again after editing these. Or you can like do the thing we said, deleting every other curve point, and then going back and smoothing. So this is like re-smoothing if you have some reversals, things like that. You can do that kind of additional editing. It's like in the cyan channel, there's this big drop down. We can smooth all that out. Of course, you will need to relinearize, and you just have to reiterate that. This is messing with the ink values, so you'll need to relinearize after doing this kind of stuff. I don't recommend doing this too often or too much, because you'll end up chasing your tail trying to relinearize and introducing a higher ink load than you really need. So accept that one. The light cyan. I just kind of want to show how this stuff works a little bit. So we can just do this kind of subtle editing there. I'm not going to touch the other ones. Those look good. It's just those are a little bit sharp. You know, this point here is a little sharp. We can go into the light cyan or light magenta. Round that down just a touch. Or maybe delete every other point again. I'm going to build a separate button here, like to extra smooth, so you don't have to delete them manually. But for now, that's how you do it. Now we have the gamma adjustment as well. Oh, shoot. I forgot about this. The gamma, you have to set that first before editing the points. It's some kind of back-end bug I need to work out. That's basically how it goes. But you get the idea. That's essentially how that works. The boost is not set up in this yet. There's some funny stuff trying to figure out, coordinate this kind of back-end storage for the quad curve and the edited one and the one that's working. So do that. We have a levels channel. So you can do the same thing. If we wanted, so you had way too much ink here, and we wanted to say, okay, let's stop it at 90%. You would say display as pigment just because it's easier to see there. So it's going to set this to 90. It's going to remap the entire scale from 0 to 90 rather than 0 to 100. We could also do something like this if you wanted to have more ink in the extreme highlight or shadows there. And you can say 0 first quad value, and it's going to zero all of these out so you have clear plastic or clear material, and then start to ramp up at whatever the scaled value is. For this, you really don't mess with the 0. This is more for the other app when you're using this for gravure. You want to have a little bit of ink in a certain part of the scale, or in the very beginning part of the scale. You can do something like this and say 0. I don't know if it's going to be too helpful for negatives, but it's built in like a regular levels adjustment. So I just left that in there. You'd mostly do it on this end here. We're just kind of rescaling everything. So say you scaled it to 50%. See how it kind of cuts everything off where that 50% point was. So you have something like that. And then the other thing is the remapping tool. So let's say we had, let's see, is this one? Yeah, where we put this was the first curve we did with the K3 inks. We put yellow in there, but all the other inks are zeroed out. Here, so let's say we wanted to, let's give a better example. Let's see. We'll use this for a second. If one channel is totally blocked out, we could, and like, you know, your print head is blocked up, you could swap this with, so they say you had the like P9000 or the 9900 as the printer with the orange and the green channels. You could swap here. So this is just loading from the curve you loaded. So you could select the orange and swap them here. Or you could really just kind of put magenta in the cyan or cyan in the magenta. You see they swap out for you. With the K3 inks though, it's kind of a cool thing you can do. So you can add that in there. And now if we wanted to duplicate the yellow into the cyan channel, you just select ink 2 as cyan curve. You just go down to yellow curve. And you see it made it green. It's because it's in the interface, it's just laying the cyan color on top of the yellow color, making it green. And you can do the same thing with magenta. So instead of magenta, which is zeroed out at this point, you can hit yellow. It's going to add that in. We had, basically no questions this time, so I kind of ended early here. What I do want to mention is on Tuesday, the night of the election, I am not going to be watching results because we're not going to know what's going to happen until I don't know, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So what I'm going to do is have a darkroom live stream. So kind of stop looking at Twitter or doom scrolling election results and just take a look at making some albumin prints that night. So starting about 9 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, I'm going to go into the darkroom. I'm going to sensitize some paper in the kind of afternoon probably. Maybe sensitize a few more sheets when we get started, just so I can have some ready. But hopefully make 4 or 5 albumin prints on Tuesday night. And if you want to join in, that'd be cool to hang out and drink a few beers or something else, and make some prints for the night. So you'll get an email for that on hopefully tomorrow. I'll get that out with some details. I'm maybe exploring Twitch as a streaming option, just so there's some back and forth. If it's YouTube, I have to look at comments, and if I'm shaking a fixer tray, it's kind of hard to have the computer right there. But with Twitch, I can have it on headphones and we can talk a bit too. So I'm going to send the email out for that tomorrow. It'll be Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Otherwise, thanks for watching in. This is going to be live streamed. The live stream is going to be recorded and put up probably as soon as YouTube finishes processing it this afternoon. But any questions, email me at richard@richardaboutlaw.com. And if you have the Quick Curve program, there is a upgrade price that's just a little bit less than the full price of the version 2 app. Also, if you like this kind of stuff, I do this on Patreon. Anywhere from $5 a month to $100. We can do live one-on-one sessions. I just wanted to mention that because I forgot last time. And that's it. Thanks for joining. Hope you like the app. Hope this was informative, and we'll see you next time.